welcome back to Reclaim You. Emily's here today, and we are recording an episode we've been trying to record for approximately 3 weeks.
What? Hi, everybody.
So today about 3 weeks ago, we planned to talk about Bridgerton. So
Yeah.
we're a
Yes.
little late.
Yeah. I mean, it's still Bridgerton summer, I guess.
Yeah,
Bridgerton vibe, so to speak. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. So we're
Mhm.
going to talk about Bridgerton, bodies in the media, fat phobia, internalized fat phobia, anti-fatness, all of those things. So that's the plan for today.
Yes. Yes.
So to get started, because we're still in the first stretch somehow of the second season, tell us what Reclaim You means to you in this season of your life.
Love that question. I think that reclaim me means prioritizing the things that I need. So whether that's with other people and setting boundaries with other people, saying no if I need to, or letting people know like my preferences and things that I need. Um, that feels really important when I think about me in this season of my life. But I think that that also extends to like personal boundaries and like being real with myself and doing
Mm,
things that I know are also good for me. So like I'm trying to limit my phone time. I'm trying to have a better bedtime routine. I'm trying to make sure that I drink enough water, like things like that. So yeah, I feel like when I think about that, I think about just boundaries in general, boundaries with other people, boundaries with myself, and just like really prioritizing needs and things that I know make me feel good, even if they're not like the most fun thing or like the easiest thing to ask for.
it's a great one. So let's dive into this. I feel like starting with defining fat phobia or anti-fatness and internalized fat phobia might be helpful to start because I feel like that's the umbrella that all of this falls under is this
Mhm.
fear of fatness. So to start off, fat phobia or anti-fat bias, weight stigma. So these are all stereotypes and misconceptions that fat people are seen as lazy, unintelligent, have lack of self-control or discipline. An author and an influencer says anti-fatness regulates the kind of bodies we see and trains us in who we are socially permitted or expected to be attracted to. So it really refers to the fear of fatness and the idea that attaining a thin or fit body is the ultimate life goal, and presenting as fat is a sign of moral failing. And something to add on that in her book, You Just Need to Lose Weight and 19 Other Myths About Fat People, she discusses the myth of fatness as undesirable, like we said before. And she writes that the prevalence of anti-fat bias has led to a popular misconception that no one is attracted to fat people. And she writes about how fat people's sexualities are dismissed and obscured because of their weight. So that's a broad view. But really, is this fear of fatness, the idea that being fat is wrong or bad, or you are unworthy if you're fat, all of these things. Do you have anything to add to that?
Was, I think, a really, really great descriptor of and kind of summary of what that means. When I think about it, I think of the broad idea that that is bad. And this
Mm-hmm.
idea that you are bad or you are less than, or like you were saying, that you are unworthy if your body does not conform with thin diet culture norms.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And when we hear about internalized fat phobia, it feels like there's a difference between internalized fat phobia and then like body dysmorphia, body dissatisfaction, poor self esteem, poor self image, all of those things. And really, internalized fat phobia, I feel like is really for folks who are fat, who experience oppression and discrimination based on their body size and weight on the day to day, where those folks are internalizing the message that because they're fat, they don't deserve the same opportunities as folks who are living in thin bodies. So folks who have thin privilege, folks who, live in, mid-sized bodies, they can experience a lot of anti-fatness, right? Where they have this idea that, again, like fatness is bad, where folks who are living in fat bodies and who experience these like microaggressions and even larger aggressions on a daily basis, this internalization of like, oh, that's right and I am wrong, my body is wrong. It feels like something to just kind of differentiate and play with as we're talking about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a very important point.
So a lot of folks with internalized fat phobia, a lot of the beliefs are like that they're unattractive, that they're lazy, undisciplined, they're less deserving of, less intelligent, that they're to blame for health issues and things like that. So a few more just factors to kind of think about as we're engaging in this conversation.
I think what I'm still kind of mulling over in my head is just how much the quote that you shared kind of plays in with a lot of the conversation that I think really was sparked and came to the forefront with this season of Bridgerton. And not that this season was the first time that we've had this conversation. I mean, this is a conversation that's been going on for a very, very long time. But I think because the show is so popular and it has such a fan base, like this conversation really blew up. And I think really what stood out to me is this idea that people in fat bodies, people in larger bodies are not attractive, cannot be lusted after or desired, or really like can't be like sexual beings. And I think that that really blew up with this season, and it's making a lot of people uncomfortable.
Yeah. So I haven't watched Bridgerton, so I half know what's going on. I've read about it online, right? Yeah. Still,
Watch it.
I know. I still need to watch it. And yeah, about a month ago when we had planned to record this episode, it was really, there was a lot of buzz about it on the internet, on TikTok, on Instagram, on all the places. So like, yeah, tell us more about what you were seeing. Like what was out there?
I feel like it was everywhere, and it was a lot of, it was both sides. And I feel like that is kind of like a lot of what we see in these like hot topic conversations, or like things that blow up on social media. Like it's either this camp that's like, oh my God, this is amazing, this is so groundbreaking, really, really leaning in and praising. And then there's this other side that's like, this is not okay. I'm very uncomfortable with this. This isn't realistic. I feel like there were a lot of extremes,
Yeah.
as there normally is, and not a lot in the middle. So kind of leaning into those, I think that there were a lot of people who felt very seen by this season. You know, this is a lead actress who has a body that doesn't fit diet culture standards, and a lot of people felt, again, like very seen by that, of like, oh, her body looks like mine, or her body's not perfect, my body's not perfect, like this is amazing. And we're seeing this in the context of this person is attractive, this person is, you know, attracting someone else, this person is kind of, we're talking about this in a way that we don't normally talk about this. And I think that that felt like really refreshing and really validating for a lot of people. On the other side of that, there was the camp of, I don't want to see that. You know, this isn't realistic. Like someone that looks like her and someone that looks like the lead actor, like that wouldn't happen. And I think that there, you know, with all the positive and all the people that felt very seen, there were a lot of people that really, really pushed back on that and said some really harmful comments, and kind of perpetuated fat phobia and all those things that we kind of opened up with.
Right, right. Which is the importance of like understanding that anti-fat bias is real and is alive. And, you know, the media that we consume and our reaction to the media that we consume is often just like a byproduct of all of that.
And I think even the conversation in general, outside of what people were saying, just the conversation in general, and the fact that this was such a topic, I don't know if it would have been if it was people in straight sized bodies. And I think that even goes to show that this is a big deal. And this is something that we need. Like, I think that we need to talk about that. I wish I would have heard people talk about like the fact that we're even talking about it. I think that that could have been a really productive conversation, but that wasn't necessarily something that I saw when I was seeing the chatter around it.
Yeah, I mean, there's always lots of misses, and the polarity of social media can get so intense, of course, in all of the ways, not only these conversations. But representation really matters, right? And the fact that people did feel seen, and that like all bodies are being celebrated, right? It was this like bid into people are deserving of love and intimacy, and celebrating relationship no matter what their body is like, right?
Mhm.
That feels just so important to name, because I think that's what we miss, and when there's shame around a relationship because of size or expectation, whatever, we step out of celebration. When we step out of celebration, we kind of step into unworthiness.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, unfortunately, that was a new way of seeing that portrayal on television. And I think, yes, there were some misses for sure, but I think for the most part it was portrayed in a very celebratory kind of natural way.
Mhm.
And if we look back at, some other examples that we've seen, it doesn't feel like it's portrayed in the same way. It actually feels like very derogatory.
Right. So let's talk about some of those real quick, just because
Mhm.
they're abundant, right? It's literally every movie or TV show with someone who's fat is some portrayal of like, you need to lose weight to be considered desirable, or to get the guy, right? Typically it's to get the guy.
Mhm.
And which there's problems in all of this, right? Like, just to say that there's problems in all of this. So we'll focus on body size at the moment. The first thing that came to my mind was Friends
Mhm.
and Fat Monica, right?
Mhm.
And that was problematic in so many ways.
I haven't watched Friends all the way
Uh,
through,
I haven't either,
but
actually.
I
I haven't
do
either.
remember those episodes, like, tuning in randomly, like, of that character, like, coming in, and it always was like, "Yikes," like, that
Mhm.
what are we doing here? What are we doing
Right.
here?
Right. Yeah. And
Mm,
even Mean Girls, this was, I don't know, was I in high
mhm,
school? I don't remember when Mean Girls came out, but yeah. And, those like significant fear of fatness that was just like normalized in Mean Girls.
mhm. The early 2000s were just abundant in fatphobia. I feel like I just saw a Instagram post on this the other day talking about America's Next Top Model.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and just the extreme, extreme fat phobia on that show, and ridiculing girls. People on the other side of the screen were like, "Well, if you're saying that to them, like, what does that mean about me?" And it was just, I can't believe they aired that show. There
Uh
should be like a
huh.
trigger warning with that show.
Yeah.
But it
Because it
was
was
just
all like derogatory, right? It was like this pathologizing of bodies that were actually straight sized bodies and very thin bodies.
even too, and I don't think that we've seen a lot of this, but in the shows or the movies that I've seen of relationships where, especially relationships where the woman might be in a larger body than the man, it's almost portrayed as a joke. And that is one thing that I thought was very refreshing to me watching this season. Was I loved that it was portrayed as just a real normal relationship. There wasn't this joke factor, there wasn't this, at least on the screen, of like, how can he be interested in her? Like, it was just normal, which is what it should be, which is what it is.
Right. Which is what it is in so many
Yeah.
relationships in the here and
Yeah.
now. And the fact that it was an actual human, right? An actual
Yeah.
person in a body, not a body wearing a fat suit, right? Because
Yes. Mhm.
if we think about it, especially from the early 2000s, right? Movies of people wearing fat suits like Monica and Friends, right?
Mhm.
Or, what's her name? I can't remember her name in Shallow Hal, which was just like,
Gwyneth Paltrow?
yeah, was it Gwyneth
Gwyneth
Paltrow? Yeah.
Paltrow? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
mhm.
like such a problematic movie, right? That someone had to be hypnotized to fall in love with a fat person. Like, so problematic in so many ways, right? Like all of these messages. I mean, what? I was in my teens in the early 2000s, right? So, wait, was I? Yeah. Sorry, I was like doing the math. Yes, I was in my teens. So all of these messages that all of us who were born in the 80s were, receiving in the early 2000s were wildly problematic.
Mhm. Mhm. And then we look at how widespread you know, fatphobia is, and internalized fatphobia and biases and all of those things. Like, there are a lot of factors there for sure, and we could get into a lot of those different factors, I'm sure, in different episodes, but I think that those messages that we receive from the media are a huge factor there.
Yeah. And so it shows up in the media, and, weight bias also shows up, of course, so much in healthcare settings. I don't know if we've
Oh,
done a podcast about that. I think we've mentioned it here and there. But healthcare is huge. The anti-fat bias, huge in healthcare settings, medical settings, work settings, of course, online, on the internet, in schools. The BMI, we've talked about this on podcasts before. The BMI stuff in nurses' office and gym classes and the fitness tests and the shaming that comes along with all of it. Right. This is all under the same umbrella.
do they still do those fitness tests?
I'll know soon. My son's going into kindergarten, so I'm sure I'll find out.
Oh my gosh.
I
Ugh.
know. I think
Mm.
Laura talked about it in one of her episodes. I don't know if someone tell us, do they still do the fitness tests?
I hope they got rid of that. Oh my God.
I know they
Ugh.
still do weights and things like that in schools. And there's always a lot of conversation around when your kid is starting school to talk to nurses and teachers and gym class teachers, PE teachers, whoever's doing this stuff that like you don't want your child to participate in, to just, step aside from any like pathology that could come alongside of it, because they don't look at growth curves, right? They're just looking at a number, and the number is literally meaningless.
Sure is.
Yeah. I guess that's a conversation for another podcast.
I was gonna say we have a lot. There's a lot there because it shows up in way more than just the media.
And I think the reason why we thought this conversation was so important is because it's not going anywhere, unfortunately, right? And the more that we can normalize seeing just like regular people being in relationships and not this ideal of diet culture being in relationship, the more we can be seen ourselves, we can be seen, right? The more we can celebrate things, the more that we can step outside of shame and blame and buying into diet culture and disordered eating and the trap that leads us into.
Yes, I love that. I love celebrate, but also normalize. Like, I think that it's great that we're having these positive conversations. We also just want to normalize, and I think it would be awesome to get to a point where it's like, this isn't like a groundbreaking thing. Like, this is just a relationship between two people.
Absolutely.
We don't have to put such an emphasis on what bodies look like.
Yeah. And to support yourself, to really like start to name it when you see it, especially online, because we're all going to be on social media. And when there are these conversations going on, to be able to name, yeah, that's anti-fat bias right there, right? Like that's problematic. So you're externalizing it instead of continuing to internalize these messages when people are saying really shitty, harmful things that are impactful to everyone, literally everyone, but especially people who are living in fat bodies.
I actually love the lead actress in this season, Nicola Coughlan. I hope I'm saying her last name correctly. But she, I think, doing press, started to get a little tired of the comments of, how does it feel? Or like comments about her body. And she kind of started to turn it on people. Like when they would be like, what do you think about people seeing your body on screen? Or how did that feel? There was a quote that I loved that she was just kind of like, yeah, it's hard. I think women with my body type, like women with perfect boobs, we don't get to see ourselves on screen enough. And she almost kind of like made it a joke, and like, but also like really like pushed it back. Can you see now how this is kind of a ridiculous question that I'm tired of answering? So yeah, calling it out, whether that's, kind of pushing it back on people, like pointing it out directly, having conversations with people that you love to kind of educate, like it's definitely a very important thing to call out.
Any other ideas that you have for folks to challenge some of these messages that we like so easily internalize because they're lots of times started in families that we grew up with? Any ideas of how to start to uproot some of this stuff?
Well, I think it can start with what we consume. So if there's something that, is very blatant or doesn't feel good, don't support that. That's not something that we have to feed into. So whether that is something you're watching, something on social media, find something else to watch or like unfollow that page. I think, first and foremost, we don't want to support things like that if we can have the power over that. I think that seeking out alternatives that feel supportive or finding places where we feel seen is a great way to kind of combat that and talk about it, whether that is in the sense of calling things out or like educating, or to just have like supportive conversations with friends and kind of validate each other. This is something that we do want to bring attention to, in the hopes that one day this can just be a very normal thing that we don't have to have so much conversation around.
And yeah, like you said, seeking out bodies that are not only like yours, but different than yours in lots of ways, right? Like bodies are so diverse. So following people or consuming content that have bodies of all shapes and sizes across the spectrum, so that you can see people living like really badass lives in literally every body there is, because that's real. Like that's happening, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a beautiful thing. Like that's the goal. That's what we want to say.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
we want to normalize.
Yeah. And I think to just kind of share a few fat liberationists who have written really wonderful books and produced lovely content online that's really impactful and helpful for folks, to name a few. And I can link to them in the show notes. So, you can go to Amazon or their websites or their Instagram page, whatever. So Jess Baker, Things No One Will Tell Fat Girls, a handbook for unapologetic living. The Body is Not an Apology by Sonia Renee Taylor. That's a wonderful book. And there's also a workbook that goes alongside of that. Fearing the Black Body, The Racial Origins of Fatphobia by Sabrina Strings. That is probably one of the best books that you can read to really learn about, like the title says, the origins of fat phobia and how the intersections of race and where all of this started. We can't speak to fat phobia without speaking to racism. So that's a deep dive into that. And then Audrey Gordon's book, You Just Need to Lose Weight and 19 Other Myths About Fat People, is also a really, wonderful read. So just a few things to maybe get you started, just to understand a little bit more. I think this like heady exploration of these concepts is important before trying to embody, like rejecting all of the things and divesting from all of the things, because that can just feel overwhelming to start with.
Excellent recommendations.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And if we think of any more before we post the episode, we can link them as well. Anything else you want to share about Bridgerton or this in general?
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was a lovely season. If you're a fan and you haven't watched it yet, highly recommend, especially the second half. The plot got much more exciting.
It's like, call it out when you see it. The bullshit.
Yeah. Call it out.
Yeah. Remembering that diet culture is going to continue to profit off your pain for as long as we allow it to. Right. Well, that's what we got for today.
Yeah. Sorry for the delayed topic.
I know. I was going to say, imagine it was 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. We'll just backdate this a little bit.
Yeah. Slide it back. Pretend like it was when everyone was talking about Bridgerton.
Yeah. Oh, man.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we will be back next week for another episode. So until then, take good care.